Hello readers, it's Sasha, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of March. March was a fantastic reading month for me. I don't know what happened, but I had such a great reading month. So I'll start off by saying that I read 18 books. I completed all of the books for the Goodreads Chooses My TBR. So there were no punishments. I'm just saying, I'm very impressed with myself because I did not think that that was going to happen. All right, so I'll start off with a few statistics. I've seen a lot of people do these in wrap-ups and I was never super interested, but I became interested after I saw how much I read this month. So I read all young adult. Are we surprised? No. 4 fantasy, 3 dystopia, 3 sci-fi, 7 contemporary, and 1 mystery thriller. Of those books, I read 0 under 300 pages, 16 between 300 and 500 pages, and 2 over 500 pages, which totaled 7,817 pages. I am shook. Of these books, I had 5 5-stars, 2 4.5 stars, 4 4 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 5 3 stars, and 1 DNF, which I haven't included in the rest of the stats. Of the format consumed, I read 11 through my own physical TBR. I read 6 on Kindle and 1 through the Libby app. And those are my stats. Enjoy my pretty pictures that took me like an hour to make, not gonna lie. So because there are so many books, I just kind of want to dive in because I feel like we'll be here for a while and I have things to do. So the first book that I ended up reading was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, and I started the month off so well. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Now, I have seen a lot of people, especially people that I trust their opinions, give it 3, 4 stars. Like, no, sis. This was a 5-star read for me. This is about a girl named Decca who is living in this community, and in this community you are supposed to have red blood. If you bleed gold blood, then you are considered to be like a demon, and then they kill you. So that's essentially what happens. On her 16th birthday, I think it is, she does the blood ceremony and her blood is gold, so she is left to die. But then this lady comes to her and is like,
do you want to be in a king's army to like fight people?
And she's like, sure. So she does. And that's the story. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed the writing. There was a lot of gore, so it does feel like it might be like a bit of more of a mature novel, but at the same time, the characters were kind of naive, so it's got a weird balance to it, but I really liked it. I thought the setting, incredible. I just kept picturing everything in my head. Like, everything was so clearly laid out for me to picture. Loved it. Concept, really nice, really well done, really well executed. I just thought it was so good. There were literally no cons I found. Literally no cons. I am shooketh. Next book I read was Neighborhood Girls by Jessie Ann Foley. This book I gave 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. It didn't really wow me. It's about a girl named Wendy whose father is arrested for being a super corrupt cop and like torturing people to get confessions and all this stuff. And so she joins this like super mean girl clique, and it's all about that. So that's like the whole story. That's all you need to know going into it. I always want to talk about what I liked first, because sometimes I like less things than I don't like, if that makes sense. But there was only one singular character who made this book worth it, and that was Aunt Kathy. Now, she was eccentric, she was fun, she was all up in everyone's business, but in the best way possible. Like, she was trying to make sure that Wendy wasn't being a dumbass, essentially, and I loved her. I thought she was like 10 out of 10, peak literature Aunt Kathy. Love her. And also, the ending did kind of make me cry a little bit, and I am a stone cold bitch, and I don't cry with books, so I cry with everything else, so that's fine. But I never cry with books, so this shook me. Like, I was so surprised to be crying, like literal, almost like tears down my face for this ending. Like, who even does that? And overall, this was a really easy story to get through, which I also enjoyed because I had a lot on my TBR, so I enjoyed that aspect. What did I not like about this book? So the mean girl in this book named Kenzie, she was like so mean, it was unrealistic. And that always bothers me because I feel like these mean girls just like don't exist in real life. And if they do, they're not ever as bad as they are in the books. At least from my experience. Like, maybe there are like super duper mean girls and I've just been lucky to like never have met them. But I feel like it was just over the top for Kenzie, and it really took me out of the story. I also didn't love the disgusting shit that happened in this book. Like, one of the jocks, like the author talked about him popping his pimple and smearing it on the wall. And I was like, this is not what I need to read about at all. Like, that's disgusting. Nobody cares. It reads like it was published in like 2010, but it was published in 2017. So there was a bit of a disconnect there because the story felt very like old school YA, but it was actually within the last 5 years. So there was a bit of a disconnect. I didn't know how I felt about that. I also found that this book was filled with white feminism as opposed to, you know, normal feminism that includes everybody, but there was a lot of like white feminism in this. And for example, like one of the characters said the word bitch, and then someone was like,
I prefer if you don't say that as a feminist.
and I was just like, how about we worry about the trans women that are getting, you know, killed? How about we don't worry if we use the word bitch? Like, let's think about things in a bit more of a different perspective, okay? Also, the main character is fucking stupid and I hate her. I could not picture myself doing anything she did, and I don't think it helped that there wasn't a lot of dialogue in this either, but like the main character was literally the dumbest human being in the face of the earth. She went out in a whiteout blizzard, like a whiteout, like you cannot see blizzard for Dr. Pepper. Like, who the fuck does that? Nobody does that. That's so stupid. I was so unimpressed with her. She was just the dumbest character on the face of this earth. And she made really bad decisions and things happened and I just hated her. Anyways, that's Neighborhood Girls. Woo, party, 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I ended up reading The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. And this was for the Winers Book Club live show, which was hosted over on Darian's channel. I'll link it down below if you missed it. But I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the writing of this book. I don't think it was exactly young adult because all of our characters were like 20s and like except like one who was like 14, but I don't know, the writing was just really well done. It almost felt like I was reading a classic book, and I hate classics, but for some reason this worked because I think it was more of like a modern classic type story and I really enjoyed it. Let me just tell you what it's about really quick. So it's about Mary Jekyll, the daughter of Mrs. Jekyll, no, the daughter of Mr. Jekyll, and she is solving murders around London with the help of Watson and Holmes, and then she meets a bunch of other daughters of figures who are famous characters in stories. So that's that. I felt like the plot was really interesting and I thought the pacing was really well done as well. It kept me engaged. I didn't feel like there were a lot of slow parts in this one, and I think maybe that's only because I also read the second one and that had like a million slow parts. So in comparison, it was quite like even, but I don't know. That's just how I felt. I also just want to make note that I was really stupid and I thought they were in the 1990s because Mary kept saying they were in the 90s, but considering it's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story, it was not the 1990s. It was the 1890s. And for a second, I was like, why are they so obsessed about wearing pants? It's the 1990s. And then I was like, oh, okay. One of the things that the author chose to do was put character commentary in the story. So for example, like they would just be like in the story and then the characters would butt in and be like, well, that's not what happened. And then the author would be like, well, I just needed to make it like sound more sophisticated, all this stuff. And at first I struggled with that because I felt like it took me out of the story. But toward the end, I actually really enjoyed it and I thought it was fun and it kind of like eased off on the tension a little bit, which could be good or bad depending on what type of reader you are. But I really liked knowing that the characters that were speaking in the character commentary were okay in the end. Do you know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed that part of the story. But do you know who I didn't like? I did not like Mary Jekyll. I thought she was extremely annoying. She was so pretentious and she was so privileged. That really bothered me because everything she did was based on her privilege, and she just kept forgetting that not everybody dealt with the things that she did. She never had to worry about money. She never had to worry about food on the table until like right now. So her attitude sometimes was really frustrating. But that's really all I can say negative about it because I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a lot of fun. So pick that up if you haven't already. Next, I ended up reading The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I really liked how fast-paced it was. It was such a fast-paced novel. Like, you could read this so quickly. It just kept going and going. And Leah, our main character, is super duper duper fun. I really like her as a heroine. I think she's pretty realistic and there's an explanation as to why she can do certain things, which is always helpful in YA because I feel like sometimes the heroines can just do everything but without any explanation as to why they're just like so good. But there is an explanation as to why here. Also, I keep forgetting, this is about a girl named Leah and she's a princess. She runs away on the day of her wedding and the prince who she's supposed to marry, as well as an assassin who was sent to kill her, follow her and meet up with her. But she doesn't know that one of them is an assassin and the other one is the prince because she's never seen the prince in real life, and an assassin is an assassin. And neither do we. Like, we do not know who the assassin is either, or the prince. We don't know which one is which. So that added a little bit of a surprise element to it as well. I did not figure out the identities of the assassin versus the prince, which I thought was good because if I'd figured it out, I feel like it would have taken away even another like half-star rating, but I didn't figure it out, and so that was good. I found the one thing I struggled with the most was that the characters lacked unique voices. I felt like every character was like the same character, especially between the assassin and the prince. It was hard for me me to distinguish who was who. And maybe that was the point, especially when we're just trying to figure out who was who. But for me, I kept having to go and figure out whose chapter I was reading. And that wasn't as fun as I would have liked it to be. I also found the writing was extremely beautiful, but that's the thing about me, is that I'm not the biggest beautiful, lyrical, flowery writing person, and I feel like that is exactly what this series is. Also, I found everybody's infatuation with Leah just a little bit off, because why did everyone love her? Like, every single person who laid eyes on her was in love with her, and it was just like, you're not that hot. I'm not trying to be like pessimistic, but like, you're not that hot. And I also just really didn't like the ending. Like, it was meant to be a cliffhanger, but sometimes if it's a cliffhanger that's like really big, I think it's kind of just like a cheap way to get the next person to buy the next book. That's just my opinion. And if I had to wait for a year for that resolution, I would have been pissed off. So keep that in mind. Next, I read European Travels for the Monstrous Gentlewoman, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This was by Theodora Goss as well. This was the second book in the Alchemist Daughters trilogy. It's called the Athena Club trilogy, but I'm not going to tell you what it's about. It just continues following the events of the first book. I really liked being back with the Athena Club. I think they're a fantastic group of characters, and even though Mary really annoys me, I still think the dynamic she adds is sometimes necessary. So I really liked being back with them. I also really liked the addition of new characters. The new cast of characters was fun. There are a lot of characters to keep in mind. Like, it's hard to keep everybody straight, but I really liked the new addition of the cast. I thought it was really fun. Like, for example, we get a little bit of Sigmund Freud, and so that was like crazy to me. I was super excited about that. I love stories that do that, so I liked that. But this was entirely too long. This is over 700 pages long, and I just did not see the need for it to be that. Like, it could have been cut in half easily, and we could have done the same amount of things, because it was just so descriptive. Like, I learned about every single detail on every single hill in the Austrian countryside, I feel like it was so descriptive, and it was so frustrating to read through. I also didn't love the ending. Like, I feel like the payoff was not worth the 700 pages of reading for me, because the ending wrapped up so quickly and so conveniently, and I was just like, I wasted 700 pages of reading to get to that. I'm not the biggest fan of the way that Theodora Goss has concluded the books in the series, because everything always just feels really convenient, and that's never a good sign. But overall, it was still like a good series, I guess. Next, I ended up reading The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This was a reread for me. I read it for the Rewind book club that I co-host. I'm not part of the live show, but I will link all the information and everything down below. But I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on reread. I loved it so much. The writing in this is spectacular. I forgot how amazing Suzanne Collins' writing is. If you don't know what this is about Katniss Everdeen, who volunteers to take the place of her sister in the 74th annual Hunger Games, which is a competition where you have to kill a bunch of other kids and the last one standing survives. And it was just everything. I loved being back in the world. Katniss is so much stronger in the books than she is in the movies. I feel like Katniss in the books, she's sarcastic, she's witty, she's going through some things, like, for sure she deals with depression, all this stuff, but she is so much different in the books than in the movies. And I wish somebody else had been cast as Katniss, and I know that's so wrong of me to say. Like, Jennifer Lawrence did fine, I guess, especially in Mockingjay. She did well in Mockingjay, but I just feel like Katniss had so much more personality in the books than she did in the movies, and that came out really clearly for me as somebody who has just recently watched the movies and now has read the book. I was just like, okay, like, where was her personality? I don't understand. I didn't find anything wrong with this book. I think, like, maybe I'm just biased because this is the first book that really got me into YA, but this will never have a flaw, in my opinion. So that's that. Next, I ended up reading Influence by Sarah Shepard and Lilia Buckingham. This I gave 3 out of 5 stars. So what is it about? I keep forgetting. This is about 4 girls who live in Los Angeles, and they all have different levels of fame, and then one of them ends up dead. That's all you need to know. So this was an okay story for me. It didn't do much for the mystery contemporary genre, but it was still engaging. Like, it kept me wanting more. It kept me wanting to figure out what was going on. And I always think that's a good sign of a book. The concept, very, very unoriginal, but still pretty enjoyable to read. I liked getting the behind the scenes look of what it's like to be an influencer, because I think that's fascinating. There's such a mentality and a mindset that you need to have to be an influencer, and so I thought this was really well done. And the characters felt distinct. Like, no 2 characters for me felt like they had the same voice, which was really, really exciting, because, like I said before, I really look for that in a story, especially with multiple POVs, especially with 4 multiple POVs. Like, you need to have a distinct set of characters, and this had that. However, there were a lot of things I didn't like. For example, one of the girls portions of her story was told in vlog format. So we get a little bit of mixed media in there, but for me, it just did not work. I would have liked dialogue with her, especially because she had so much depth to her character. I really would have liked to see that, but we really only got the vlog section. One thing I didn't love was that this is like a very minor thing, but they called their moms by their first name, but they called their dad's dad. So like every single character in this was like, okay, that's my mom Bethany and that's my dad. And it's just like, I understand that men ain't it, but like, why are we calling our moms by their first name? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. It was just weird. There were also too many characters. Like, each POV had its own set of characters because each girl had their own lives. And so it was really hard to keep it straight. That was one thing that really bothered me about having multiple POVs. I find it really hard to do that in a successful way where you're not getting confused because there were so many characters. Like, the cast of characters was ginormous and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. And I feel like there were a few plot twists in this that the author thought was like brilliant genius 10 out of 10 moments, but I could smell them a mile away. Like, they weren't original, they weren't creative, like they were very, very obvious from the get-go, but that's okay. You know, like some plot twists you're always gonna catch up on or you're gonna catch on to, but it was funny to me that they were like, this is this mind-blowing revelation. I was like, of course it is. Like, y'all are dumb for not seeing it. And finally, I didn't love the OCD rep within this book because I feel like as somebody who doesn't have it, I can't speak to the actual representation, but I feel like the author just didn't do the correct amount of research because it almost felt like she thought that OCD could go and come depending on like your moods. And I understand that there are certain things that are going to trigger OCD more than others, and there are going to be days where, you know, symptoms, they act up a little bit more. But this girl in the story, she has OCD, but she acts, because things work out for her at the end, her OCD like goes away, and that just isn't how it works. It's easier to manage when you're not stressed out, for sure, but like that's not how it works, and so that bothered me as well. Next, I ended up reading Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is another 5 out of 5 star read for me. I absolutely adore this series. Like, this is one of my favorite series of all time. I love it so much. This follows the events at the end of the Hunger Games, so I'm not going to go into what it's about in case you've never read it, but this was a book of emotional journeys. It was so incredibly emotional for Katniss, for Peeta, for Gale, for everybody. Like, everybody went on an emotional journey. And I really liked that. I enjoyed that aspect of it. As someone who has already read it, I feel like the Easter eggs were more enjoyable because I was like, I know what's coming. Like, y'all can't fool me. And so I enjoyed reading this and then picking up on the clues of what was to come. I also just adore Peeta. Like, he's the perfect man and I would die for him. Like, that might be dramatic, but that's where we're at in this life. The one thing I will say about this book is that the pacing was off. Like, when you watch the movie, you get right into the action. But when you're reading the book, there's like 60-ish maybe pages of action and then it's all over. And you're just like, that's not what I signed up for. Like, I didn't sign up for this much action and this much emotional journey. Like, that just doesn't work for me. So that was my only con, but I still think this is a 5 out of 5. So next, I read Mockingjay, and the book is still in my bedroom and I'm too lazy to get it, so we'll have the dust jacket for today. But I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. This follows the events of Catching Fire, so again, I'm not going to say what it's about, but I really enjoyed the emotion and the grief within this. I thought it was really intense and really powerful, and I loved it. I thought the way that they handled grief and emotion and depression and everything was really raw and really well done. I actually cried at this ending too, I'm not gonna lie, and it was like, I'm not gonna say what it was about or what part of it got me, but it wasn't the part you'd expect. Like, if you've read this, it wasn't the part you'd expect. It was the part with the cat, and that's all I'm gonna say. And it was at the end. And I also really liked Katniss in this as well. She was portrayed as a real person in this. A real person, a real 17-year-old girl who's going through all of these things and all of these emotions, and she's portrayed as a real character, as opposed to this girl who's starting a rebellion. Like, it just, didn't love Gale. Gale is one of the reasons this is not a 5 star. He's a whiny little bitch boy, and I don't like him. I literally watched Mockingjay Part 2 last night, and he was also a whiny little bitch boy in that. So I didn't love that. And I also did feel like the ending battle was very rushed, and the conclusion was a very rushed conclusion. But that is kind of the theme I'm finding with series. So maybe that's just me, but I really liked reading this again, and I liked it way better than I liked it the first time. So next, I read I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. This was our group book for the BTS readathon, which was amazing. This is about a plus-size girl who's trying to break into the K-pop industry by auditioning for an American K-pop reality show. I really liked the girl power and the confidence aspects of the story. Like, she was really confident in herself, and that's always nice to see, especially in a young person. However,
it was a little unrealistic, but we'll get to that.
It was a really good, like, rom-com story. Like, it's super easy to get through, super quick, and I feel like it would make a good kind of like Netflix rom-com type situation. And I also really like the representation. We get a plus-size main character who is Asian and bisexual. Like, what more could you ask for? But there's also LGBT characters on the side, and I just really overall really liked the representation that was done. However, this was an unnatural story. Like, Lila Lee has written children's stories, I believe it was, but this definitely felt like her debut YA, and it was. But I don't like being able to tell. I know that's really picky, but the writing was just unnatural, and it was clunky, and it didn't make a lot of sense, and so I didn't love that. Some of the fatphobic remarks, I understand why they were necessary given the storyline. However, they felt oddly placed at some points because she wasn't a plus-size person. So at times, it felt like it was a skinny person trying to tell a fat person's story, and I realized that Lila Lee did do research, and she did, you know, talk to plus-size people in Korean industries, but I still felt like if you don't put in the whole amount of research, like if you don't do more of the research, then I feel like you shouldn't be telling that story because it isn't yours to tell, if that makes sense. So at times it was just oddly placed fatphobic remarks where I was just like, that wasn't necessary. And I'm not even just talking between the mom and daughter, because that's a very real problem with beauty standards being different in Asia versus America. So I'm not saying like her fatphobic remarks, but more so like other just like snide little like comments. Like, I don't know, it bothered me a little bit. Didn't love the Harry Potter references. Also, it is 2021. This was published in 2020. JK,
whatever her freaking name is,
literally has been proven to be a transphobe. Like, why are we still including references in our books? Like, it is time to move on. But overall, still a cute story, and I liked it. Next, I ended up reading The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. This is the second book in the Remnant Chronicles series, follows The Kiss of Deception and what happens after that. I thought Leah's character growth...
Oh, this was a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place.
I thought Leah's character growth was fantastic. She was a fantastic character in the story. The ending, so good. Loved the ending. The ending in this really made up for the ending in the first book, because where it was still a cliffhanger, a really powerful cliffhanger, it was one of the ones where it was just like good. Like, it made sense. Like, it wasn't just a cliffhanger to be a cliffhanger. Like, it made sense to the story, if that makes sense. And we're gonna still go with, it is too descriptive. It is a very descriptive book. The whole series is very descriptive. And where Leah's character growth was incredible, Leah as a character kind of bothered me a little bit in this. But I still liked this book a little bit more than I liked the first book. Then I read Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus, my first Karen M. McManus book, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The ending had me shaking. Okay, what is this about? I'm so sorry. This is about twins who have to move into the town that their mother grew up in because their mother is doing something else, so they're moving in with their grandmother, and this town is infamous because a lot of murders have happened there. So for example, like, their aunt was murdered like I think a long time ago when she was 17, and then there was a murder 5 years ago, and now there are other murders that are happening, and people are blaming one guy. And the ending had me
quaking.
Like, I immediately messaged May, who was like, I really hope you like this, to talk about the ending, because it had me feeling things. Like, I'm probably gonna think about this ending until the day that I die. I also really liked how fast-paced it was. I feel like I could get through it so easily. I think I read it in a day. Like, it was really easy to get through. A couple things I didn't like the writing style at first. I felt like the sentence structure felt a little bit clunky at times, but I did feel like that got corrected around the halfway part. Also, didn't need the obsession of true crime, because Ellery, who is our main character, she is like obsessed with true crime to the point where she's like,
I'm gonna put everybody in danger because I think I could solve this better than real people who have been trained.
And where you're probably not wrong, I still feel like you should think about dangerous situations. Do you know what I mean? So that was kind of frustrating. Also, one of our characters called his stepsister hot, and I was just like, I get that your parents have only been married for 4 months, but like, chill, because that's disgusting. And there was just a couple of little like consistency details that I feel like didn't match up. Like, for example, Malcolm, who is one of our main characters, he's in marching band, and she says that he has a set of snare drums draped over his neck, or draped around his neck. And my hubby is a percussionist who has done marching band things at times, and that's just not a thing that can happen. You can have a set of another type of drum, I forget what he said it was called, and you cannot have the thing draped around the neck because it hurts. So you'd have to have it like a harness. And so I feel like I am qualified to say that, because I highlighted the passage and then went to Noah and I was like, is this a thing that can happen? He was like, what the fuck? No, that's not. So maybe it's different in the US, but for me, that just kind of like took me out of the story a little bit, because I feel like it doesn't take long to research. And that is like the least important thing of the story. Like, you could have not even added it. So Next, I ended up reading The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson, and holy shit, this was 4.5 out of 5 stars. We're quaking in our boots. I loved this conclusion. Oh my god. Action, insane. The emotion, insane. Leah, oh my god, the character development from here to there,
Insane.
I loved Leah as a character. She might even be one of my favorite female heroines at this point in time. Literally the only cons were the two boys. Like the two guys were the only cons because they were just so obnoxious and so frustrating. But holy shit, like this was a great conclusion to a series. Next, I ended up reading The Sinister Mystery of the Mesmerizing Girl. This is the third book and the conclusion in the Athena Club series. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars, so it was a little bit more enjoyable than the second book, but it didn't live up to the first book. I love the world and the concepts that Goss comes up with. I think it's really interesting. I think she's a really fantastic, imaginative writer, and I feel like this trilogy did end nicely. Like, I feel like it wrapped up well, but Mary is still a very pretentious and privileged character, and I don't love her as much. I don't love her at all throughout the entire book, and again, this ending was just a little bit too convenient for all of the build-up that we did to the ending. I just feel like it was all too convenient and the payoff was a little bit too chill. So yeah, I hate when that happens, but I think that was a theme throughout this story. But overall, the conclusion wrapped up really nicely and I was really happy with it. Next, I ended up reading Tiffany Sly Lives Here Now by Dana L. Davis. This is a book that I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is about a girl who's lived in Chicago with her mom and her grandmother for her whole life until her mom passes away and she moves to California to live with her dad that she's never met. And then she is contacted saying that there's another guy who could potentially be the father, and she has 7 days to tell the truth to her dad that she just moved in with before like a paternity test and like lawyers come and stuff like that. So for me, I love this book. I thought the anxiety representation was insanely well done. Like, Tiffany is our main character and she suffers from really bad anxiety, and as someone who is like literally medicated for my anxiety, I understand where she was coming from. Like, it was relatable and I loved that so much. I also thought that the discussions that were had were really important, like religious discussions, religious freedom, grief, death. There were a lot of healthy discussions and there were a lot of healthy payoffs to those discussions. And the emotions that I felt were very, very real. Like, I was literally like tearing up again at the end because it was just, the ending was very powerful to me. I didn't love the writing style in this, and I think that was like the only thing that I found that I didn't love about it. But yeah, the writing style really took me out of the story sometimes, but overall, like, this was a fantastic book and I would recommend it to anybody. Next was the book I DNF'd, Girl of Nightmares by Kendara Blake. This sucks. I was really looking forward to this book. This is the follow-up to Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake, and I read that in October, and I just couldn't get into this. The characters pissed me off. Cass, who is our main character, he is like so in love with a ghost, and it was just really uncomfortable, honestly, and I just didn't care anymore. And maybe if I had read it right after the first book, I would have cared more, but I just did not give a shit about this character. So unfortunately, I couldn't read it. I got about halfway through, I got 150 pages in, and then I was just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. So I gave up. And final 3 books, we're literally done. How good is that? I read the Bells trilogy, Bells, Winter White, and The Grass is Always Greener. Now, if you want to know my full thoughts on these, I'm going to just say watch my next video because I'm not telling you anything I felt about these. You can see my Goodreads reviews. I gave 2 of them 5 stars, 1 of them 4 stars. But if you want to know in-depth thoughts, my next video coming out is my reading vlog where I read these. So yes, those are all the books that I read in March. I still can't believe that I read that many. That's like insane to me. But yes, let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these, how you felt about them. I'd love to hear about it. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I do post twice a week and I have some really fun videos coming out that you're not going to want to miss out on, including this reading vlog because there's a lot of gushing and sitting on my bed. So I feel like you'll want to see that. And until next time, bye readers!